Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and we are lifelong Catholics, and what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church, and we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today, our opening, we are going to do that. Today, we're going to take on the Pilgrim Society's war on Christendom, both the Orthodox, the Protestants, and the Catholics. And welcome Brother Alexis to the program.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure and an honor. And I'm coming you here from lovely Italy in the springtime. And we're going to talk about something that needs to be talked about. We've been focusing on skull and bones and the Masons in the church or in the United States. And we've been neglecting the Masons in the United Kingdom, the Pilgrim Society. We've done some programs on it. So now we're going to get deeper into that. And the Pilgrim Society's chief function, chief goal, and chief objection has been to destroy Christianity. And the reason for that is that they're backed by the Rothschilds family, who are they're Jewish, kind of by blood, but not by religion.
Yeah.
So this is a new topic for most of our American audience who don't know much of British history. So we're going to go chronologically. And I first want you to remember certain things. London is the city where the Freemasons started. Oxford University is where their chief is the chief recruiting ground for the Pilgrim Society. And you're going to hear a lot of things named that you know and have heard of. You say they came from England, they came from the Freemasonry. So here we'll go. So where does the story begin, AJ, and in what year?
It starts way back in Oxford by a speech we covered and read to you by a man called John Ruskin. This speech inspired, well, we know it inspired Cecil Rhodes, Alfred Milner, and his friends to start the Pilgrim Society, and what led to World War I and all of this. But the characters you're going to hear, well, they stayed underground because of this, but they're no longer hiding. So these Protestants, socialists, were all inspired by that speech of John Ruskin. And so let me begin with the first guy. Scroll on up here. Samuel Barnett. He was an English clergyman, social reformer, and founder of Toynbee Hall. He was born in Bristol on February 8th, 1844, a son of Francis Barnett, an iron manufacturer, and his wife, Mary Nee Gilmore. He was educated at home and at Wadham College, Oxford. He taught for a while at Winchester College before traveling to America. It was this visit to the United States that provided Barnett with his important education. When he returned to England in December 1867 to be a curate at St. Mary's Church, Brighton Square, London, and took the priest orders of the Church of England. He also then, it was around this time, and 1851, he noticed the impoverished Whitechapel parish of St. Jude in the east side of London, in the worst of the slums there. There he started to do the social push for social reforms and do soup and all that stuff to get food and help to the people, which is good. But he took the gospel message and made it socialist. So now we have someone else who comes on the scene to help him do the social gospel. And who do you think that is?
You got to name the founder of the Salvation Army.
Yep. A former Reformed Methodist minister, William Booth, and his wife Catherine Booth, who first formed the East London Mission from 1865 to 1878, when the name changed to the Salvation Army.
And what kind of Christianity did they push?
It was by the name it was militant in spirit, as we of the Salvation Army can take care of these people, but it was a very socialist form of Christianity.
So salvation meant getting them out of poverty.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like liberation theology.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And well, any good project needs press coverage. And we talked about this man before in a program we did. William T. Stead. He was a real dirtbag. He helped to advocate to lower the age of consent for children in regards to sexual matters. He tried to uncover the pedophilia scandal going on, which included the Rothschilds and Milner and everybody. But the police discovered that, well, he was actually also taking part in that through his butt in prison for a bit.
Didn't his paper that he worked for in a certain way spread a lot of disinformation about Jack the Ripper? And
Yeah. And you need money and power behind it. So yeah, Cecil Rhodes, Alfred Milner, and the Rothschilds are part of this too. So, but before we get into the 1900s, I want to get to this guy. So we've seen that Barnett traveled to America, but he didn't have this inspiration of the social gospel yet. Once it all got formed up, right around the time of the Salvation Army, they needed to get it to be spread into America to the Protestants. So we have this Episcopal Church Bishop Henry C. Potter. He began to spread it during the Panic of 1873.
And what city did he do his work in?
Alrighty, let's see here. Get past as many marriages here. Okay, Grace Church, which is New York City.
New York City. So he went on to become quite esteemed and famous cleric in New York City, praised for doing lots of social work. But once again, it was the gospel for the purpose of economic well-being, which has become a very common theme among the Protestants. You become a Christian so that you can prosper in this world,
Yeah.
instead of becoming Christian so to save yourself from this corrupt age, which is the real gospel.
Yep. So if you want to learn more about this guy, we have him linked. It's a real deep, dark rabbit hole.
So the Pilgrim Society was out to corrupt Christianity and bring it down to earth, as it were. And so they targeted the Protestants. They targeted the works for the poor. How did they target Catholics?
Well, they got their two famous English Catholic writers to do it, who are part of the Fabian Society. Sorry, Trans, going to break your hearts. G.K. Chesterton and Hilaire Belloc.
So what was the Fabian Society and why was it so dangerous? And why is it so dangerous?
Yeah. The Fabian Society is a British socialist organization whose purpose is to advance the principles of democratic socialism via gradualist and reformist efforts in democracies, rather than by revolutionary overthrow. The Fabian Society was historically related to radicalization, left-wing liberal tradition, and it was one of the founding organizations of the Labor Representative Committee, and it was the important influence upon the Labour Party, which grew from it.
And the symbol of the Fabian Society is anvil and what I don't know you call it, a hammer and an anvil.
Yeah.
And they were very influential in the United Kingdom. That's why even by the time of the Second World War, lots of the elites in England were socialists and big supporters of Adolf Hitler through the Fabian Society, which makes it all seem nice and neat, but they push Marxist revolution. And
Yeah.
and how did Hilaire Belloc and Chesterton contribute to this?
They were prolific writers for their papers, and they also wrote books, which was filled with their propaganda. And they did sign a document in the First World War to be the propagandists, to push for the propaganda for the Rothschilds and the Rhodes to control the narrative of what was going on.
Mm-hmm. So they're not as Catholic as people would have them think. And I know if you're from the United States, if you're not from the United States, you may not know this, but in the English-speaking world, not only in England, but especially in the United States, reading those books almost like required if you're a conservative or if you're a traddy. As soon as you get anywhere near an organization that's conservative or traditionalist in the U.S., there's someone recommending you read those books. They're quoting those books by those two authors, and it's like you have to buckle and follow that stuff. And that's been going on a long time. I ran into that in the 80s when everyone started telling, oh, you have to read G.K. Chesterton. He's like the greatest Catholic writer. And they'll give you the more Catholic works for them to read. But if you go on and read their other works, you see that they're open and blatant socialists.
Mm-hmm.
And socialism consists in the error of exalting the state to the one that controls the economy. And the state has no purpose to control the economy because the economy pre-exists the state. So it's an error. It's a form of idolatry, and it's a way that it's a very convenient ideology because it enables rich people who control banks like the Rothschilds to control everything if you accept that ideology. It's very instrumental to get you to submit. And but they weren't satisfied with just corrupting the Protestants and the Catholics. They also went after the Orthodox. And who was involved in that, and what did they do?
Yeah, so they had to bring Vladimir Lenin and Trotsky to London. So they had a man who was raised by a Bible publisher who was Protestant, Philip Whitwell Wilson. He was a member of the Liberal Party, a devout socialist, again, like all these others. He hosted both Vladimir Lenin and Trotsky in his house in London. They, with Philip Whitwell Wilson, helped form the YMCA. They were in London on April through May of 1902, May of 1908, 1909 of June 1st to the 28th. They were back in London on July 1909, and the last trip they ever took to London was November 11th in November. And this Philip Whitwell Wilson, he helped create the Bible that would be mass printed that now by the Gideon International, which is now in all your hotel rooms.
Okay, so we have the Pilgrim Society and the Fabian Society in your hotel room, that so-called Gideon Bible. I've never really studied the translation to see how it twists scriptures, but I think I could bet on it now. But they did more than just host Lenin and Trotsky, didn't they? Finance them and support them?
Yeah, and then and after they got them, wined and dined and financed, the Alfred Milner had to have a contact in Russia who was near the Czar and the king. Was it King Edward VII, I believe? It's like, Mr. Alexander Dvorsky, I want you to be my man when I come to Russia visit my cousin Nikki. Nikki was the Tsar. And it was there that after the horrible defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, and I gotta get some help for our Russian guys. So he went to the Rothschilds, and the Rothschilds paid him to do what he did to destroy Russia.
To destroy his cousin. It's really shameful. The Rothschilds wanted to destroy the Tsars ever since the Council of Vienna in the 1820, when the Tsar Nicholas nixed the whole Rothschild plan for reorganizing Europe. And this is why, to this day, international finance hates Russia and hates Russians, just like they hate Spaniards. For example, the death vax in Spain has tagged a lot of people with Bluetooth numbers, which isn't true in many nations, but it's because the Rothschilds have a particular hatred for the Spanish race, a very, very bigoted family. So the Pilgrim Society has been very active, and they have studied well how to slowly bring down Christianity and change its meaning until it's devoid of any kind of spiritual content. And you can see how Vatican II fits into this whole trend of pushing that same idea that you can't turn towards God, you have to turn towards the people, and you certainly can't play in Latin anymore. That's just absolutely forbidden. So, do you have more to add about this conspiracy, AJ?
Yeah, from A Parliament for the Press, the First Imperial Press Conference. We'll be reading from Chapter 7, the fourth session speech by Lord Balfour. Now, let me get this thing open up here. It'll take a bit.
I'll remind everyone that Lord Balfour is the one who got the British government to publish the Balfour Declaration calling for the establishment of a Jewish state in the Holy Land. And Balfour was the Rothschild's agent. Balfour was Jewish. So this is a very important talk. And this whole, these press conferences, these parliament of journalists, was a Rothschild project to convince journalists to work for them in bringing governments under their control by controlling the narrative of the news and manipulating the masses and the votes of the masses. So they're very, very significant conferences. And you can find online the actual list of all the lectures and who were present. So what did Lord Balfour say in part during his speech? And which of the conferences we're talking about here? What years did he give this talk in?
Yeah. Let me find it here. Okay, we got so it was there we go. So it was welcome. Give me a date.
Are you talking about the 1909 conference, or is this the
Yeah,
1913
1909.
conference?
So the people in attendance were Lord Milner, Mr. Burrell, Mr. Winston Churchill, Lord Morley, uh, uh, everybody of the Pilgrim Society was there. And Sir Edward Grey, you know, the guy who gave us the tea. So this my neighbor on my left, Mr. J.W. Hackett, has terribly pained me this afternoon by informing me that even in Australia it is currently believed that I never read a newspaper. This is the speech of Lord Balfour here. To what hasty words of mine this world-wide impression, for so I may regard it, is due, I really do not know. But at all events, let nobody suppose that I underrate the power of the press. And above all, let nobody believe that I do not recognize to the full the function which the imperial press may fulfill in promoting the mutual comprehension which is the basis of mutual esteem between parts of the empire. I have heard it said that many gentlemen who come from Canada, from Australia, from New Zealand, or from the Cape are sometimes pained by the ignorance shown by dwellers in this part of the empire in regard to even the largest of the domestic interests. That ignorance is perhaps greater at this moment in these islands of the colonies than it is in the colonies of these lands. But that is not going to be permanently the case. We are parochial by instinct. It is natural to concentrate your mind on the immediate controversy in which you yourself and your own personal interests are obviously concerned. But unless we can cultivate successfully among the great bulk of our population, wherever it lives, in whatever quarter of the globe it may be found, that imaginative, sympathetic insight based on knowledge, which is the only solid bond of unity, we shall certainly deprive ourselves of the greatest of all bonds that can unite a scattered empire into one organic whole. It is to carry out the end I have thus indicated that I look above all things to the labor of the press. I can do it as no other force can, must be written, so as to attract readers. And unfortunately, it is not always the instructive things which are the amusing things. It must have been borne in upon every man who has listened to the debates which have gone on during this week, that the feeling throughout the empire with regard to imperial defense is one which must bring a glow of pride and pleasure to every man with imperial interests. So far as I am aware, not a jarring note has been struck on that subject. Differences of opinions on details there not only may be, but must be. Cannot the press and will it not successfully preach the doctrine which is at the root of all local security, namely that local security must fundamentally and in the end depend upon imperial security? If that doctrine be preached, and if it finds, as I am convinced, it will find ready acceptance among all classes of our fellow countrymen in every part of the world, will not the press have been the greatest and most effective conceivable agent for laying deep and solid the foundation of that unity, which it is our business to create out of the scattered and disparate fragments of this world-wide empire. No statesmen have ever had before them the task which lies before the statesmen of Great Britain in the self-governing colonies. It is our business to see that this great and new experiment shall in our hands succeed. And it is on your cooperation and the assistance of the enlightened organs of the public opinion that I would most rely for creating that public opinion which is the very basis of the whole fabric. Let it be noted that what we want is for every part of the empire in the first place thoroughly to understand the conditions involved in imperial defense, and they ought to understand the sacrifices which part of the empire is making in that common cause. I am not bold enough to prophesy by what means, if any, a greater organic and constitutional unity, and not unity of sentiment or unity of machinery, can be obtained. There was a time when the relation between this country and the offspring of this country were like the relations between parent and child. But no politician of any party in this country holds that view any longer. And he goes
As you
on.
can,
Yeah.
and as you can see from that speech, it is extremely clever repackaging of patriotism in a system where there is central control of all local loyalties. And he wants the press to get everyone involved in the dominant narrative that the Rothschilds are going to control through the British government and the British royal family. And so it's very, very clever. And he says something very important, a unity of sentiment and machinery. Well, that's pretty much the objective in the Great Reset too. They want to plant something in your body or in your head and get you to think exactly what they want and act like a robot. So the objective has not changed in 120 years, and it's the same people still behind it.
Yeah.
But they're very clever in studying psychology and motivation and creating a narrative that people will believe in. And this has been the success of the Pilgrim Society, and this is what makes many people think they're a good organization, but they're really very devious, satanic organization that is expert at infiltration and manipulating people to become part of their system of control.
Yeah. And before we close, I found this out by watching the Eastern Rite masses on Facebook at a Russian Catholic parish out of California. They were supporting and celebrating the birthday of John Ruskin from a speech done at the O'Reilly Center in Notre Dame College, Notre Dame University, and so at the O'Reilly Center in Notre Dame University, they celebrate and honor the man who started all of this that we are now experiencing, John Ruskin.
It's really shameful that a Russian Orthodox parish should be praising him, since he and his followers were the ones who brought down the Russian Czar and the Russian Orthodox faith in Russia. It's really amazing. But unless you know the history, you can't know how to separate yourself from the system of control. So all those books by Chesterton and Belloc, and if you see a forge and anvil on any Catholic organization symbol, social gospel,
Yeah.
the gospel exists to save this world. That's all. And if they're hiding at YMCA, now you know where the YMCA came from and how it's closely associated with the benefactors of Lenin and Trotsky, who killed millions of Russians and Ukrainian Christians. And I guess that's why the YMCA is so anti-Christian. Claims to be a Christian organization, youth Christian ministry, but it's really anti-Christian, secularist. Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's been a pleasure.
Yep.
An honor.
This is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.